Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the first two lines of the Etude number 18 in B-flat major. There are a lot of notes, and there's no great place to stop except in the middle, of course. But since the video would be very long if I tried to do the entire first half at once, we'll take in smaller pieces. So let's get started. To begin, let's take a look at the overall Etude. It's quite long, just 38 measures for the number of measures, but each measure, almost every measure, has 6 notes in it. So 38 times 6, that's 228. That's a lot of notes for a very short etude. And it's got a very wide compass, meaning the lowest note to the highest note is 2.5 octaves, almost the entire range of the oboe. To begin, you should go through the entire warm-up sequence that I mentioned on my previous video, and then practice the B-flat major scale, both slurred and tongued. Now let's take a look at the first two lines of Etude number 18. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of these two lines, let's mention some of the aspects of the B-flat major scale that you've got to practice. Most importantly, the note F. Now, of course, we're all familiar with the regular fingering for F, which you will use in this etude. And of course, you'll be using left F from time to time in this etude. But because of the speed and the arpeggios that are used in here, forked F, with or without the E-flat key, is also okay in this etude. Before we move on, let's review one of the problem notes that occurs in the first two lines, and that's E-flat 6, the high E-flat. That fingering is such: half hole, 2, 3, the low B key, and the second and third fingers of the right hand. The octave key is not used. This is also referred to as the long E-flat fingering. It's a bit awkward. But in this section of the etude, the middle of line 2, that's the fingering you should be using for the E-flat 6. Now, before we actually start playing parts of the etude, let's review counting, especially the first two notes. A lot of students will approach the first note as if it were a tongued grace note that's not really in a speed. Frequently, I hear this kind of thing. The problem is that's not what's written in the composition. It's a 16th note, which is a half of a beat. So students should think about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1. With a metronome, that would sound like and 1. Now let's take a look at the value of the first long note, the B-flat above the staff. It's 3.5 counts. Frequently, I will have students perform this as a fundamental tongued with the beat that sounds like this. And you'll notice that gets the student to think about that the first note lasts 3 counts and the first half of count 4. Together, it will sound like this. Now let's continue looking at the counting. Measures 2, 3, and 4 are just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and no big problems there. Now let's take a look at measure number 5 and 6. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6, and 1, etc. So there are basically 2 types of counting exercises in the first two lines: straight 16ths, and then the 8th note followed by 4 16th notes. So to prepare for the beginning of the etude, breathe slowly and deeply and think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1. Everything you see on the screen, from the first line to the middle of the second line, needs to be done in one breath. So when you practice, make sure you take a very large, deep breath. Now, if you look at the music, you'll see that the first chance to breathe is the middle of line 2. That means you want to take a slow, deep breath at the beginning. I would encourage you to think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1 for your first two notes, and breathe during that time, like this. Pa-pa, Now, on the music, I've given some suggestions for phrasing that allow you to vary your dynamic level instead of just playing forte all the way through. After the first measure, back off a little bit. Mezzo forte is okay. And then crescendo bit by bit until you get to the breath. Please keep in mind that because you're taking a breath, you do have the option to rubato the tempo slightly so that the breath is prepared in the ear of the listener. Now at a faster speed, we still only slow down a little bit. Of course, you and your teacher may prefer that you not do a slight retard into the first breath. In that case, the approach will sound something like this. Now let's listen to several iterations of the first two notes of the etude, being careful to enter exactly on the and of beat 6, half a beat before the downbeat. Now let's talk about the basic approach to learning the technique. The first step would be to slur every note regardless of rhythm to make sure your fingers are even. Such an approach might sound like this. Keep in mind that as you play the music in rhythm, especially for the note F, you will need to write on the music. Are you going to be using regular F or left F or forked F? Most people don't mark regular F, but any left Fs you're going to use and any forked Fs you're going to use, you should mark them and then stick with them. Once you're able to slur out of rhythm 1 to 2 measures, practice it with the metronome. I suggest starting at about 120 beats a minute. You'll play those 1 or 2 measures now in rhythm. Let's now take a look at some of the places where you'll need to consider regular, left, or forked F. In the second complete bar, you've got an E flat coming up, the third note. That means your second note is going to either be left or forked F. If you're going to play at the Regent audition a medium speed, say 160 beats a minute, you might want to consider going ahead and play left F. But for those of you that are advanced technique and you're really going to fly, forked F is probably okay. The same thing is true in the next measure when you have E flat followed by F. At a medium speed, left F will probably be okay. But at a very fast speed, forked F may have to take place. And you may have noticed when I played the etude myself at a fairly fast speed at the beginning, I used forked F only in measure 4. But on measure 5, I prefer to use the bottom note, the 6th note of the measure, as regular F or left F, especially left F, since you have an E flat afterward. And it will sound like this. Regular F or left F is going to have a more even tone and will sound tonally, the tone quality, more like the rest of the notes. So it's an odd place to pause on forked F because it's on a downbeat and the listener will hear a slight difference. But for the others, you probably are okay at a fast speed to use forked F. Now you have the F finally right before the breath in line 2. You will definitely want to pause either on left F or regular F. Before the breath, the judge or audience member can tell a slight difference in tone quality. I alluded earlier in this video to shaping the phrase because everything at the beginning is just marked forte and there's nothing else marked. Your private teacher may also have some other ideas, but I encourage you, by all means, don't just play one dynamic level. You'll notice there's places where the music goes downward in contour, like measure 4. That's a good place to decrescendo slightly if you like. And then overall, the patterns in measures 5 and 6 ascend, and that may be a great place to put a crescendo in. Now let's talk about your approach to tempo. If you're serious about making all state, of course, you're going to want to play it as fast as you can without missing notes. For those of you who are experienced and those of you who are new to the all-region process, probably 120 beats a minute is a good starting practice tempo. It's still fairly challenging to play evenly at that speed. And then think about what you want to do for tempo on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and over the course of the entire fall. Now let's discuss articulation for a moment. Most of the etude is slurred, but tonguing does occur in some unusual places. For example, measures 5 and 6, where you have 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. Again, the approach to the practice is first slur everything, and then practice slowly, making sure that you're tonguing in the right place. Can you imagine how frustrating it will be if you find out a month or 2 months later you've been tonguing in the wrong place? Then you'll have to spend several weeks reteaching the articulation. Start by being very picky about following the articulation that Ferling has provided. Now let's discuss building the tone quality. Remember, the warm-up is an integral part of the practice session, and you'll need to start with the long tones. Make sure that you can have some vibrato on your B flats and Fs. Those are the notes that the judges will hear the most, and they're the most common note notes that are held for a long period of time. When you get to the audition, you'll be allowed to play one note. Many of you, of course, will choose B flat, which is okay if it's the B flat in the staff, because you want to give the judges a good taste of the tone quality that is to come in your audition. But since the first note is on F, that's also a very good note, and I suggest that you use that as your one-note warm-up. Remember, journaling is an important part of the practice regimen. Every day, write down what you practiced, what tempos you used, and then write down how successful you were or what were your challenges. After a couple of weeks, you can monitor your progress, and this will give you a great sense of satisfaction in making your goals on a long-term basis as you prepare for the all-region auditions at the end of the fall semester. Remember that all preparation takes persistence and determination. Make sure you have good reads. Make sure you're mentally and physically ready for every practice session. If I can assist you in any way, my contact information is on the screen. Good luck, and I'll see you at part 2 of this video.